Atop the whole world, the man stood silent, his tranquil posture unmoved even by the loudest of gales blowing at him through the cold evening sky. No matter how much he wanted it not to, the grave that lay before him seemed to be just as quiet. Once again, recognizing the contours of the words engraved upon the marble tombstone, he couldn't help but sigh. He had seen this exact view so many times that you would think a man of his position would have learned to somehow live with it after so many years. And yet here he was, once more sitting on the frozen bench, next to the sum of all of his mistakes. He wished that he could say something worthwhile, something that would make that pain all go away, but he knew that no such cure existed, no permanent one at least. The temporary solution, however, was well within his reach. He began his little ritual for the 1425th time, ready to strip away his sins under the midnight sky. He threw off the snow, this time of the year a meaningless gesture, that covered the grave whole. He tried his best to scrub off the ice beneath it, but the cold that ruled these heights was beyond even people like him. Unable to do much more, he pretended for just a moment that he was content with the words that now appeared before him. Rest in peace. With just a touch of his finger, he lit the candles standing upon the cold marble slab. He knew that up here, fire didn't mean much for long, but there was a certain calmness that the action instilled within him. It felt as if for just a few moments the spirit within the grave lived once more, unburdened of its terrible fate of mortality by his flame of compassion. He sat back up on the bench, straightening his back. It hurt like crazy, but deep down he thought that it should hurt like that. Getting up here wasn't meant to be pleasant, wasn't meant to be easy. It felt only appropriate that there was much more to his regret than just a scar upon his soul and a wound upon his mind. Silently, he spoke a prayer to whatever force was still out there, and was still willing to listen. He didn't expect a response. Still, the quiet words exited his dried-up lips all the same. They too hurt like crazy, though for different reasons. They too, he thought, should hurt like that. He once more corrected his hat, making sure that the cold northern winds didn't take it with them. They had already taken too much. But the cold winds were nothing if not patient, and they had nothing but time. They knew just as well as he did that the day he would finally let it all go was inevitable. Now he could see the chilling evening before him slowly fade into an even colder night. If he still wanted to get back down today, now was the time to finish his ritual and begin his descent. But today was special. Simply doing the barest of his duties without any further words wasn't enough on a day like this. Tonight the grave, and in some minuscule percent his self, willed another sacrifice. He could see it in its cold and marble stare. He sat down back again, continuing to stare at the quiet, lonely grave. Were it not so cold, his undiluted tears would have perhaps even held some meaning. Not really sure what else to do, he cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone rough after so many years of silence. After so long, certain words felt like they had begun to lose their meaning. He was glad to find that at least that particular phrase still hit it like a truck. "I'm sorry that I wasn't there when you truly needed me. I should have done more. I could have done more, but..." He felt his old voice waver, already strained from his age. The cold around him, the sheer difficulty of grinding out his monologue and the emotions that it carried. Still, he continued all the same. "You didn't deserve this, you never did. I wish that I..." He didn't know if he had enough strength left inside him to finish. For just a single moment he thought that the day when he had finally never come back from here and had finally arrived. That this today was his final pilgrimage to this frozen monument. When he took a deep breath, though, he soon realized the world had given him another year to mourn. For another night he was to live. If he was being frank, he wasn't sure how he felt about that realization. He sighed and continued all the same. I had everything, we had everything. We had it for so long that I took it for granted, I suppose. How stupid of me, he chuckled, the pain of the expression throwing his body whole. And even with all my wisdom and all your knowledge, I still couldn't have foreseen the obvious, so blinded by my unwillingness to listen, neither to you nor to others, and for that too I'm sorry. He briefly paused. Perhaps in another life and perhaps in different times I would have listened. I would have stuck my head out of my hole and seen that you weren't just numbers, that you weren't just statistics. I worked so hard to provide that, I forgot who I provided for. After a while it all blurs together, you know. Emotions and numbers, a funny thing that. He smiled, but the gesture was only symbolic. Maybe in a better place I was a better partner. Maybe, but I don't think we'll ever get to know that. He inhaled sharply, letting the cold air inside his nostrils and then his lungs. The chilling atmosphere stabbed and poked. Still, he took another deep breath all the same. That was as much as he could do to remind himself that he still had a responsibility to stay human. After that, the pain did its job rather well. His eyes rose up from the ground, eventually landing upon the bottommost sentence engraved upon the tombstone. Non omnis moriar. Not everything will die. Somewhere deep inside him, he felt a phantom memory of just how much it hurt to put those words on the cold marble stone. But he figured they weren't just a lie that he told himself to feel better. As his sight drifted toward the horizon, he was glad to know there was a certain truth to them after all. Seeing the vague shapes of what looked like something meant as a settlement beyond the edge of his vision, he spoke up once more. After all I had done, I didn't expect your legacy to still be alive all these years later. Truth be told, it amazes me just how much they've survived, just how much they've endured. But then again, you were always tough, weren't you? I suppose I should have seen that one coming as well. He paused, and for that, I'm also sorry. Squinting his eyes, he tried to see something more of those beautiful half-buildings engraved in the last cold mountains in the whole world. If it wasn't for the angle of the rising sun's light, and the fact that his sight really wasn't so good all those years later, he could have maybe even seen the faintest glimpse of the remains of that who he had so loved. He wished that he could. He wished it beyond all of his might, praying wordlessly to be given his last final chance at forgiving himself. With another sigh, he came to understand his lesson, and turned his gaze away, focusing on the tombstone for one final time this evening. I wish that we had more time. I wish I could have realized what we had done before I lost you. A cold, cruel shiver went down his spine as he felt sharp tears beginning to form in the corners of his eyes. He shook his head. There are so many things that I still want to tell you. So many things I still want you to tell me. The time that we've had after all that I had done, I don't think I could ever possibly ask for more. If I could, though, there isn't a thing that I wouldn't trade for just a single day longer. Not a thing. He smirked with sadness in his eyes. But then again, only plastic flowers never die. For a few moments he sat there, nothing but silence laying in his mind. But when he felt the heat of the rising sun calm the raging blizzard for just a bit, he slowly stood up, hesitant in the movement. Nevertheless, he walked up towards the grave for one final time, and started rubbing away at the final ice-covered row of text. With the temperature of the new day, the task was almost menial. Rest in peace, Homo sapiens. Without a single word, he looked down upon that final punch in the gut that he had prepared for himself so long ago. The gravestone was an exaggeration, but only just barely, because ever since the end, 99.99% of all mankind could have just as well been all of it. He never stopped blaming himself for it, not with all the power that he had to prevent it, not with all of the hubris it took to blind him from ever seeing such a possibility as plausible. With a final tear to the rising sun, the administrator of the late SCP Foundation corrected his hat and departed from the final burial site of humanity. Maybe somewhere down the mountain, somewhere in his temple, somewhere in the place where the illusion of his dubious apotheosis was still maintained by a select few fools who could find peace. Maybe. He always told himself that, but the first few steps off the peak never failed to force his own lie to fade. He could return to his godhood and prosperity all that he wanted. He could indulge in everything those that worshipped him provided. He could even declare himself as anything and anyone. And still, despite all of that, the man would never find peace. Not for as long as the gangrenous wound which infected his soul would linger on.